Good evening and welcome to Newsmaker Live. Thank you very much for joining us this evening on a night where we're hearing of so many developments around the world, but we have some happening locally. Egypt, something that they're not calling a coup, but the military has taken over the government of that country, forced President Morsi out. Do I have his name right? Yes, something close to that, Mohammed. And but they're saying it's not a coup, so it will be very interesting to see what transpires thereafter, you know, in the ensuing weeks, because Egypt has just become a democratic country for the first time, you know, going through that democratic process of having elections. And now, 1 year later, we see that the military has taken over once again. Of course, Hosni Mubarak, who ruled Egypt for 30 years, was a military leader. He was an Air Force pilot before he became president of Egypt. He was a lieutenant, actually, in the Air Force of Egypt. So very interesting, and we'll look at the implications for St. Lucia if there are any geopolitical scenarios that will arise thereafter or therefrom. So we'll try to get some of our local foreign affairs experts tomorrow in our newscast to determine what sort of linkages there are and what sort of effects this coup or no coup will have on us locally and with our relationship with that country. Also, the Prime Minister presented well, he was supposed to deliver his speech tonight. I think he did. Unfortunately, we were preparing here, so I didn't get an opportunity to watch it, but I will review the tape and see exactly what he said. He did not do it, but he was due to make that presentation. Hopefully we'll find out why he did not and see what he has in that presentation, but that's for a different show. However, tonight we're excited because Carnival, I should not get too excited about Carnival, but I am getting excited. Carnival is back in the house. You know, we're looking at the street parades in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, and we have representatives of the Steel Bands Association here. We have the president, Vinetta Paul, with us. Welcome to Newsmaker Live. It is very nice to have you. It's always nice when, you know, somebody can match me in terms of the yes.
Thank you for having me.
And then we have Mr. Cauldron, who is the PRO, and he's also the head of the organizing committee for Panorama. I mean, welcome to you too.
Welcome, thanks.
It's a pleasure to have you and to be talking about PAN, because PAN is so integral as part of Carnival, but we have so many different issues. I didn't want to say issues because sometimes we appear that we always bring up problems, but we don't see PAN like we should be seen in the grand scheme of things. Let's talk about PAN first of all. PAN is back, right? And PAN is strong this year.
Yeah, PAN has always been around.
Well, it has always been around, but not in the Carnival sometimes, because I remember a couple of years that PAN was absent. You know, Panorama. Okay, and that's something that we miss from, because PAN music is, I might be biased, but the sweetest music you can ever hear. Yeah? Sweetest music.
Well, we will see that. We as Panists will see that.
Of course. I'm not a Panist, but I could identify good music when I hear
music, it. Yeah, but the general public is not so with everybody.
So let's talk about the whole preparations for Carnival, first of all. The involvement of the Steel Bands Association in the organizing.
Well, at the commencement of the year, we realized that, you know, we were trying to work to get Panorama this year to be a bit more bigger and a bit more exciting, and so from the onset we tried to put an association together, and me, I guess, being the president, first female president, we selected a group of persons which we think had the energy to push forward for a very successive Panorama this year. And coming out of that, we have realized that there's a lot of work to be done. We have a lot of things that we had to be putting in place, and it has taken us to the point where we realize that, hey, PAN needs to be back on stream full force. And so we have put in place our Panorama committee within the Steel Band Association, headed by Mr. Julian Cauldron.
And you're heading that committee. How difficult has it been? Or how exciting? Let's be positive
no,
here.
It's exciting.
I'm
it's
sure
not difficult. To know that you're preparing for such an event, and you have to put all the bolts and nuts in place, and to make it be a good one. It's exciting.
I'm sure Vanetta would tell me that like before last month you didn't have so much grey.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, that's exciting, right?
It wasn't there. Yeah. No, but it's sleepless nights because there's a lot that goes into the panorama. And it's unfortunate that within the carnival season there's only one showing of the steel bands around the island. I guess it's logistics, it's cost. Because with the advent of all the laptops and the sound systems and whatnot, it is cheaper for bands to be able to hire the hi-fis.
But you can never match the real thing. I remember I'm not into carnival, but then there are certain aspects of it that I kind of gravitate towards. And remember way back you had pans on the road, and you had the trucks with the pans and them playing the music and stuff. We don't see that anymore.
That was in the days of the hi-fis, and I mean again the bands now are getting bigger in terms of numbers. Back in the times when I used to play on the streets, the bands, basically a lot of the times the steel bands themselves had the carnival band. So they were not actually playing for a band, but they had the carnival band.
I see.
And they had revelers playing with them. Then it evolved, and you find at one time then the steel band used to play for bands. I remember playing for St. Lucian Spirit and this type of bands, and you had Sikra, because at one time Sikra himself used to have his own carnival band.
Right,
his
I
own
remember
steel band, I think, Coca-Cola. That's where I started playing first. But then after a while, as things evolve, you find the hi-fi come around and the big bands come around. Well, the brass came around first. So now you had steel band and you had brass on the road.
Right.
Okay, and then afterwards, now with the hi-fi coming in, and with the sound system and the bands getting bigger, the steel bands cannot cater for those big crowds that they have now. Because you have bands with thousands of people with 6, 7, 8, 9 sections, and each have 300-400. Now, if you have a steel band on the road, it has to be amplified.
Right.
Now, the amplification and having a steel band. You see, a steel band basically is numbers. To complement the band, to make the band sound good, you have to have numbers, because you have to have the different instruments to complement the sound that's coming out. So it's more difficult to put a steel band on the road.
But it's not impossible. It's a matter of logistics and expense as well.
It's very expensive for a steel band to be on the road. There were the days when the steel band had the racks, and as they improved, they went to double deckers and whatnot. Again, before, your steel band would come on the road and would have it racks, and you get members of the public pushing. It was fun for people to be pushing those racks around. Now when
you have to
pay for that.
Yeah.
People no longer want to be pushing the racks. Some people used to enjoy that, but people don't want to do that. So now you have to get trailers, you have to get tractors or whatnot, or buses to pull these racks around. So it's actually costly. It's actually costly.
But let's talk a bit. I know you're the head of the Panorama Committee, but let's talk about the Steel Bands Association. You came in recently as the first female president of the association. What are some of the things that you're doing to secure the long-term existence of the Bands Association?
Okay, well, coming in, we had to basically restructure the band, because it was just a one flow where, you have the head and the president had to be overseeing every other aspect of the association. We felt that in itself had limited and perhaps would have contributed to the failure of the association year after year. And so coming in, we have branched out management and responsibilities. So myself, I'm heading the management department. We have Mr. Hussein Griffith Zoro. He's heading the education aspect in terms of teaching and catering workshops for the arrangers and judges and all these other things. And we have Mr. Cauldron, who is in charge of exposition in terms of pushing the social events like fiestas and festivals to get the Steel Band Association always involved year-round in terms of putting up activities, so we do not only come out for Carnival, but we are consistent throughout the year.
And when you say consistent throughout the year, what sort of events do we expect to see the bands, the Steel Bands Association, engaging in?
Well,
throughout
after
the year?
Panorama, normally we have the big event, which is St. Cecilia's Day, Mr. Cauldron.
Yeah, well, we have Feast of Musicians in November.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we're looking forward to putting up something very grand. And from on that end, we are going to try to bring in the junior bands, because fair enough, the junior bands only come out at the beginning of the year where they have the junior panorama, but there's nothing left for them. So after the junior panorama and senior panorama, we're trying to put something together where we have all of our players coming in and giving us something very good towards the end of the year.
Now, you talk about the education. I know that some schools try to incorporate steel band playing as an extracurricular activity, but not all of them have it. What sort of relationship do you have with these schools to promote the playing of steel band and building up sides around the
Well,
island?
for now, this is work in progress with Mr. Hussein Griffith, who's the head of education. There are some schools who have had it, and it's not very dynamic. It's not growing, and so we're trying to see how best we can find ourselves into these schools. However, one of our challenges we have noted is the cost of getting those instruments. We have the cost of a tenor piano is about $2,500, and to have a proper orchestra, it will cost perhaps maybe close to $20,000. And then there's the issue of getting a proper arranger to be dedicated towards the children in terms of the times. And so we have a number of things that we have to put in place and look at to see how best we can get schools going. But our PRO, Mr. Alexander, who's also a teacher at the Babylon Secondary School, he is also pushing PAN at his school. We also have Mr. Hussein Griffith, who has his after-school program in Balasa. And we have students from the Babylon Secondary School, the Balasa Primary School, and from the environs who are coming in on afternoons, and they're getting that kind of, after-school activity with the PAN.
There's a lot of happening in Babano. I mean,
Yes.
Babylon
why-
has about 6 or so bands.
how come? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but
No,
I
it's
mean,
not
it's
a
very
bad thing.
interesting that Babano would
But
have
it's
so many
interesting also
band
that
sides.
I'm also from Babano.
Oh, you are?
Right,
Okay,
yes,
so the
I am.
president is from Babano, so
Babano.
Babano is expanding.
Right, yes.
In terms of the schools, there are a few schools that some of them I think the government did establish steel bands in the schools. I think there was at Dimpullet. Yes, there's instruments at Dimpullet.
Ancillary.
Gozile Secondary School, Ancillary, I think, yes, and Marigo. I think they were established school band. They were established steel bands there. At one time, I think CDF also was on a steel promotion.
Well, I know Convent had one. I don't know.
Convent,
Right.
yes, that still
But
exists.
I don't know
that
what
still
their
exists.
relationship-
Anchipo has one.
Yeah.
Leon Hess
has
has
one.
one also. When we look at it and we look at the dynamics of the whole steel band, location of all the bands, and the location of the schools, we see that is something that can work hand in glove. Because if you start looking at from the north coming to south, you will realize that in Gozile, you have the Pan-Time Steel Orchestra at the entrance to Gozile.
Right.
And then you have the Gozile Secondary School there, which can easily be a feeder school, feeder for the students. But again, you see, who is going to take responsibility? Because there's a cost to it. Could you imagine just imagine you have your pan side. Okay, you want to get players in, you want to train, you want to do some outreach program, but then you have to have a resource person. Who is going to pay for the resource person? Because you find that I'm going to engage somebody to do it. He has to be compensated. My pans. You're going to be using my pans. Students new to the instrument. They might get on tune and set on whatnot, and you have to get somebody to come in and do it. It's a costly venture. So it's a work in progress, collaboration between the school and the band to get things going on. Because the bands would love to get players. When Panorama comes around and you need 80 players, where do you get that from?
And I mean, I say, boy, there's nothing sweeter than steel band music. Let's take our first break on Newsmaker Live. We're discussing PAN as we look forward to the 2-day street parade for Carnival coming up in less than 2 weeks. Stay with us. Newsmaker Live continues right after this break.